The Holy Gospel according to Luke, the 13th chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
At that very hour, some Pharisees came and said to him, "Get away from here, for Herod wants to kill you." He said to them, "Go and tell that fox for me, 'Listen, I am casting out demons and performing cures today and tomorrow, and on the third day I finish my work. Yet today, tomorrow, and the next day I must be on my way, because it is impossible for a prophet to be killed outside of Jerusalem. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it. How often have I desired to gather your children together, as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you were not willing. See, your house is left to you, and I tell you, you will not see me until the time comes when you say, 'Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord.'" The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise be to you, O Christ.
Grace and peace to you from the one who was and who is to come. We hear almost daily of people around the world fleeing from their home country because of violence or turmoil. Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Service is one example of an organization working to advocate for migrants and refugees and assisting people caught in conflict or facing persecution. Since its founding, LIRS has worked with partner organizations to resettle more than 500,000 immigrants and refugees. Perhaps you know of someone who's been a refugee, who's resettled in your community. Perhaps you've been part of a congregation that has helped to resettle a family. Perhaps this is something that we're called to together. In our baptisms, we are called into relationship with God and one another, and it is these relationships that endure through our entire lives. Living in and out of this relationship strengthens us to participate in God's work in the world. The assembly welcomes the newly baptized at the Easter season. And when we do, we share these words. We welcome you into the body of Christ and into the mission we share, giving thanks and praise to God and bearing God's creative and redeeming word to all the world. What are some ways that we are participating in this work in our daily lives, in our Lenten wilderness, in these 40 days, from Ash Wednesday to Easter? Are we helping to resettle refugees? Are we helping to provide hungry people with food for nourishment? And then, in this particular story from Jesus, when he calls Herod a fox, he evokes an image of himself being a mothering hen, gathering chicks under her wings. Can you imagine what that might feel like to be caught up underneath God's heavenly wings, fluffy down and soft and warm, and the energy of God breathed into us in that place? Jesus knows the rejection that will face him as he approaches Jerusalem, and yet he still expresses the wish to love and protect the people around him, even the people who are opposed to him. He doesn't say, "Because you don't like me, I won't like you." He says to those who despise him, "I still love you, and I still want to gather you up into my shelter." Blessed is the one coming in the name of the Lord. This comes from Psalm 118, verse 6. It's also in our liturgy. Blessed is the one coming in the name of the Lord. The disciples sing nearly identical words as they approach Jerusalem, but some of the Pharisees tell Jesus that his disciples have to be quiet. The city is not yet ready to sing those words because they are yet unable to see or appreciate that in Jesus, God is in their midst. Those words that are sung are said at our table communion during the communion liturgy. A few years ago, there was some discussion and education to educate congregations about making the cross across their own bodies. Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. With that line, do we open ourselves to see and to receive the one who comes in the name of the Lord, the one who comes to us in bread and wine? Are we open to receiving Jesus? Are we open to being ambassadors of Christ in our daily lives and in the world around us? My friend Pastor Brian tells a story from Lucy and Snoopy. Maybe you're a Peanuts fan too. It's a Peanuts cartoon, and in the first frame, Lucy is standing next to a tree. Looking up, she shouts to Linus, "What are you doing in the tree?" Much like Jesus asking Zacchaeus what he's doing in the tree. Linus answers from the branches, "Looking for something." Then he adds, "Can you see Snoopy? We climbed up here together, but now I don't see him." Lucy unsympathetically shouts back up the tree, "Beagles can't climb trees." The next frame shows Snoopy falling out of the tree right on his head with a loud clunk. "You're right," Snoopy concludes. Then Lucy lets Snoopy have it. "You stupid beagle, what are you doing climbing around in a tree?" Snoopy's sore head is still spinning. Linus interrupts the two from the tree. "Don't yell at him. We're trying to find a strange creature in a nest." Lucy walks off saying, "You're both crazy. Go ahead, knock yourselves out. I couldn't care less." Then Snoopy, with his head still sore and spinning, says, "Rats. Rats, I was hoping for a hug." Do similar scenes happen to us? We hurt ourselves, perhaps physically or emotionally, and a parent or a friend or a parishioner or a parent gives us a lecture about how stupid we were. "Rats," we might say to ourselves. "I was hoping for a hug." There are those times when what we need the most is to know that somebody still cares for us, still loves us, because inside we know we've acted like jerks. One of the most dreadful Christian sins is that we often act exactly like Lucy. We're too quick to open our mouths and give lectures to others. It's so easy for good and righteous believers like ourselves to judge and condemn others for their stupid mistakes. What compounds our sin is that we think we're doing the proper and the right thing by giving them all of our good advice. "You shouldn't have done that. You should have known better. You're getting what you deserve," and so on. Sometimes some people need good teaching. Jesus is often teaching the disciples, but many times, especially after making a stupid mistake, people feel more like Snoopy. "Rats, I was hoping for a hug." Offering an embrace is much more risky than lecturing. Suppose when the demon-possessed man came to Jesus, Jesus gave him a lecture about all the evils of the occult. "You shouldn't have gotten involved with that group or that stuff." It wouldn't have done that man any good. But with a lecture, we can keep our distance from other people. And if they reject our wise advice, they've rejected our wise advice. When we get close enough to people to really care about them, to offer an embrace is a gesture of love. And if it's rejected, it's so much more painful. They're rejecting us. "Don't touch me," someone says. "I'm too big for a hug, Dad," a little boy says. When a daughter admits to her parents that she's pregnant, it's not the time for a lecture about morality. When a son admits to his parents that he's hooked on drugs, it's not the time about a lecture about addiction. When the police bring a child home after a car accident, it's not the time for a lecture on irresponsibility. The people in these situations already know about the problems of immorality, addiction, and irresponsibility. They are much more in need of a sign of love, of a sign of belonging and acceptance, not judgment. Some time ago, there was a TV show where they interviewed a doctor who was treating people with AIDS. To paraphrase one of his comments, there are other doctors in this town who give lectures to dying AIDS victims rather than helping them. You are just getting what you deserve, is what some have said. Who is in more need of a sign of love and care than a person who has been informed that they are going to die? The TV program showed the helpful doctor hugging a person with AIDS. The image we are given of God and of Jesus is a hen gathering a whole bunch of chickens under her wings. What might that imply to our relationship with those other chickens? It requires a physical closeness to be packed together under those wings. It implies learning how to get along with one another if we wish to stay packed together under those wings. We have to stop pecking at each other. How do we balance our own comfort level of the space with this image of being physically gathered together under God's loving wings? Rubbing shoulders with each other on the way out of church, sharing the peace with other people, an embrace when appropriate, and especially in this time of a pandemic, hugging those that we live with, hugging those that we share common space with. How do we share God's grace? How do we get shoulder to shoulder with one another? How do we proclaim to one another that we're part of the same brood, that we belong under God's wings together? One of my pastor, preacher, instructors at seminary, Professor Richard Jensen, in his commentary on Luke's gospel, talks about Jerusalem as the city where great evil takes place. But then he also talks about this hope. Human sin dwells deep within each and every one of us. Will God have anything to do with sinners like you and me? The answer is yes. Grace and sin met in Jerusalem a long time ago, and grace won. So may it be so for us. Grace wins. Our sinfulness meets the crucified prophet, and grace wins again. Grace is God's final word on the sinful character of our human hearts. Thanks be to God.